Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. All right. To begin, what would cause or inspire a human being to say that the mind acts like a portal? What I have intended for this episode, a certain part of it is going to be me explaining the theories of consciousness so far we have as a species. And also, I wanted to emphasize on this point that I have made in other talks, that the mind is double-edged. That we human beings are trying to understand our minds, we're trying to understand the mystery of consciousness, but we are not realizing that the mind is like an activity between two dimensions, not just one. If a person looks at their body, sure, they can say the body is made of an object, right? I think nobody would disagree that the body is objective, like a person can touch stuff, you know. But when it comes to the mind, can a person say my mind is an object? They can say the brain is an object, but the mind is what the brain is doing, what the brain is leading to, It's another way of saying free will seems to be how a brain is convinced that it's a subjective controller of the object. It's like our brains are, it's like the brain takes in light and, let's say light reflects off a mirror. Let's say there's a hall of mirrors, light is like ching, 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 like reflecting off all the mirrors. So similarly, let's say light entered the eyes of a human being and the light beam hit the brain, and how the light beam reflected off the brain was into a sort of subjective psychosocial, socio-psycho-cultural, position. What I'm trying to say is that light enters our eyes and then we become a character in a story. And the character in the story holds its position in a subjective stance. That means it's purely subjective. And you know what I'm doing, guys? For this episode, at first I'm sharing my own theories and visions on it, and then this, I will explain the theories of consciousness as in some sense in one in which perhaps will make the academic dimension smile. The idea is that there are dimensions to human perception. These dimensions at first are self-conceived. When you look at the evolution of the behavior of a child on this planet, the child doesn't know anything, right? The child, it's not that it doesn't know anything, it knows how to be its nature. Like you see, for example, in these nature documentaries or like Animal Planet or something, you see, for example, a deer, a pregnant deer gives birth to a baby deer, and the baby deer already knows how to walk. Like the deer doesn't have to teach the baby deer how to walk, right? Its design imbues it with the know-how of its manifestation. It's as if genetics, one can have this view that reality is just made of imagination, and genetics is imagination before imagination. reality can be seen as that, right? It's like a person closes their eyes, they visualize a world, right? And then they open their eyes and they're like, wait a minute, could this world I'm being in be a visualization? I would say the biggest issue right now we find in 2022, just pretty much people who are alive now, the biggest issue is that the species has not overcome its subjective fear of the unknown. We have overcome our objective fear of the unknown in the sense where it's as if, like, you know, our ancestors looked at the sky, they looked at outer space, it was like a scary place, and they managed to get there. Right? We overcame the obstacles of our outer reality. Now, if we were to wonder about the obstacles in the inner reality, once the mind is one of not only the most mysterious factor of conscious experience, but it's as if like our minds, at their core, are a dehumanized witness. And this is a very intense statement. I don't know how the viewers are going to hear this, right? Because when somebody uses the word dehumanized, there's usually fear, right? It would be equivalent to, like, let's say somebody walking in the park and suddenly an alien, like, you know, an alien-looking alien appears, you know? Right? Imagine an alien that's like, it's not humanoid, right? Imagine some sort of creature appears, right? It's as if in that moment there will be a shock to the system. Right? It's as if human beings are aliens. You know, it's like, imagine there's some human beings who believe aliens are in the sky watching us, and they're like, why don't these aliens come down to talk to the human species? Are the aliens shy? And in actuality, it's because we will be so overwhelmed by that which is not in the human archetype that in some sense we will stop being human. You see, interference, for example, in Star Trek, there was, like, for example, what was it? The Prime Directive? I don't remember the exact term. I haven't seen all of Star Trek, but pretty much this idea that, like, advanced civilizations should not interfere with lesser civilizations, you know? That influence doesn't have to be just physical. You can say that, for example, a very young child sees like a very explicit movie, and the child doesn't know how to contain it, how to in some sense stabilize, attach an emotion to its sight. Right? I'm just trying to say that dehumanized states are freaking out the human being because the human being has believed only in the human archetype. It's another way of saying the way human beings are understanding the world is by humanizing it. Now, if they come to this realization that the nature of their attention at its core is not per se the human archetype, it's another way of saying if 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, if 8 billion named creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere suddenly realized they were objects and they were not objects and subjects, the overwhelmment of the true actual experience of that let's say view is in some sense like, it's as if a person is like, okay, if I'm not an object and if I'm not a subject, what is the purpose of any purpose? What is the purpose to a space being alive in regards to receiving matter, right? And this idea that the mind is a portal, I mean, I guess I could say this, that the mind is acting like a portal, and the reason of this is simply because it has action, it has ability of expression in 2 domains of being. Right? It's as if the body is expressing itself in like what appears to be a singular physical dimension, but the mind seems to be expressing the body, moving the body, but it seems to also be expressing itself in regards to imagination before the person moves. Right? It's like this question, is reality imagined or is imagination unreal? You know? And so technically what has been going on is that it's like, rather than it being like people treat life as if like, okay, I'm a character in a story, and in some sense, like, you know, this character in a story is starting from a beginning and walking towards an ending, right? But in actuality, what is happening is that for the body, for the biological body, sure, you have a beginning and an ending, but for the mind, every moment the brain is re-simulating itself, right? It's this weird thing where it's like our bodies are acting like a temporary being, but our minds are acting a sort of acting as if they're a sort of, you know, unconditional creative force. The mind is not born in the world. The mind awakens. When it comes to the mind, the main duality of consideration is consciousness and unconsciousness. When it comes to the body, it is existence and non-existence, right? As a biological, let's say, materialistic entity, what is your reaction to the world that you see? Pretty much the person has no choice. They're like, okay, there's stuff in space. Stuff after a very long time became this, so this is stuff in space, right? The materialistic perspective is the simplest perspective, and it's a perspective that doesn't even need to be spoken about, right? It's as if like we already know we are material, right? We don't know if there is something way more than the matter going on. And of course, philosophers and psychologists and mystics, they know there's something way more than matter going on. But in some sense, if a mind, let's say if an abstract mind, and let's say the idea of self is an abstract object, you know, an object in the inner realms is like a subject in the inner realms is like an abstract, a subject is an abstract object, pretty much, you know. And you can say an object is a real subject, you know. What I'm trying to say is that what seems to be very important to the human experience is a relationship. It's a relationship based on how one's accumulation of experience and how one's current experience is redefining the value of their potential experience. Okay, if right now I take a materialistic perspective, I'll be like, okay, nothing ever made sense. Stuff in space doesn't have to have any sort of meaning. The concept of the human idea is as if I was a true materialist. I've seen more. It's like I know better. And of course people are going to be like, this kid's ego, you know. But I'll say this, that to me materialism, sure, people may think it's truth, and it could be, and we're living in a world that wherever your attention lingers, it becomes your truth. If a scientist goes and hangs out with Buddhist monks for like years, it's going to change. You know, the perspective's going to change. It's like where the attention is, the world is accessible to be conditioned, right? Even the concept of freedom has to do with how attention moves in the space-time continuum, or how attention is moving to itself before it moves in the outer realms. What I'm trying to say from a materialistic perspective, meaning is a hallucination. It's as if a chemical reaction is the divine story from a materialistic perspective. But if we take an immaterialistic perspective, it's as if we are asking the question that could there have been a causal intelligence that is not conditional to shape. Pretty much we're like a shape in the middle of nothing, and this shape in the middle of this massive cosmic emptiness, right? It's like emptiness. How would I say it? In Vedic thought, they call it Purusha and Prakriti, matter and consciousness. If matter comes in the causal position, imagination is a hallucination. If imagination comes in the causal position, if the mind comes in the causal position, reality is a hallucination. And what seems to be happening on this planet right now, I find this is happening. I've been listening to to some recent podcasts of very important people talking about this idea. And you know what it is? It's pretty much human beings are realizing that they have access to two universal contexts behind their eyes. What that means is, in front of our eyes, singular concept in a singular context. Behind our eyes, we are, believe it or not, a multidimensional context. Multiple concepts are in a place of an unknown context. Okay? And how is the mind acting like a portal? I mean, if somebody said the mind is acting like a time travel machine, that's super easy. Like, everybody knows. Like, the proof of that is super easy. You know, it's as if, like, remember what you ate last night, you know, or remember, you know, what you said yesterday. It's as if memories are the instantaneous activation of a memory is another way of saying a moment that previously existed still exists in the mind. That's what memory is, right? Memory is a way of saying that the experience has been eternalized up to this point. Pretty much, guys, there is another site. This is the fascination for this episode. In the subtitle, you'll see I've written, "The mind is a portal beyond duality." I was wondering whether I should make that the title or the current title. And the reason I'm saying the mind is a portal beyond duality is because the only way we can acknowledge chaos and order is to have a simultaneous understanding of them both. It's as if somebody's like, how do I understand darkness? It's like you need the light as a contrast point. How can I understand the light? It's like you need darkness. It's like, let's say somebody tries to be a good person. Let's say you right now listening to me, you're like, I'm a great, like you think you're the best person or you think you're a good person, right? It's like, how do you know you're being good? It's because part of your mind had to accept the reality of evil. How are you being evil? Because a part of your mind had to accept the reality of good. You see, this universe, the yin-yang symbol that in some senses has been projected forth from Confucianism. It's like there is such a huge truth as like the secret of how this dimension behaves that you can have the most chaotic world and there will be an ordered rebellion, and you can have the most ordered world, there will be a chaotic rebellion. You know, it's like just like we can't see the edge of the cosmos, right? We can't reach the edge of a system. It's as if the notions of a perfect order or a perfect chaos are inaccessible, right? And it's as if a person wanted to go into a truly chaotic realm, then if they didn't have a reference for an ordered realm, they wouldn't know it's a chaotic realm. Do you see what I'm saying, guys? The human experience, when it comes to the psychological entity, is manifesting not through just the filter of a cosmological duality, how the sun is like an on-off light bulb in a room, you know, influencing the psychology of the creatures in that room, but at the same time, that in some sense the meaning, the presence of meaning and the absence of meaning or even an incredible statement. I might even give a talk on this, but here I'll write it down. The presence of absence, the absence of presence. I think this is one of the most important philosophical ideas, which in the future I will speak about. When a person understands duality, they understand pretty much everything. Everything that can be talked about, right? If this is, to me, a sort of street smart advanced communicator, is a person who has realized that meaning has dimensions where it's manifesting through. So pretty much duality is another way of saying the mind is acting like a portal, right? And again, back to this point that if a person was born in a completely ordered universe, they wouldn't have the concept of order for it. You know, and if they were born completely in a universe where it was just chaotic, they wouldn't have, you know, the concept of chaos. And similarly, we can say this, I guess, for the human experience in another way, that imagine if you were born in an illusion, you would never know it's an illusion, right? Or if you were born in the truth, you would never know it's the truth. It's as if singular reality accessible. You know, I would say some of the most greatest, like to me, back in the day, human beings fought physically. Like imagine, you know, ancient Greece, ancient Persia, like these empires would fight. You know, there was physical war. Right now we have become civilized. We're like, okay, why reduce our lifespans? Instead, let us in the inner realms fight. Right? It's as if the warrior spirit is not that it is gone. It is not that the future generations are becoming softer and softer and softer. But what is happening actually is that the might of our wilderness, that we used to be animals, the brain has evolved over millions and millions of years. It's as if history has sculpted our attention, right? And a great, massive part of our attention is in some sense the memory of continuity. If you look at it from the perspective of an object, the meaning of life is continuity. If you look at the perspective from the perspective that you're a subject, right, the meaning of life is truth. You know, truth is for minds. You know, infinity is for bodies. A biological entity's purpose, pretty much, I mean, think about it, guys, whoever you are listening to me. What are the options, right? Either human beings go extinct or human beings don't go extinct, right? And when human beings don't go extinct, they have in some sense pretty much two types of immortality to engage with. If we manage to maintain a humanized okay, so let me say this is an important idea. So let's say we have humanity, we have the concept of extinction, and we have non-extinction. Okay, that means the human story ends, you know, and the human story doesn't end. Now, when it comes to extinction, I should write, guys. Let me get out my notepad. I should show this on a notepad. So you know, whenever we talk about extinction, you know, you got to get your notepad out. You know, that's my guys. I think if I was a philosophy teacher in a university, you know, the students would be, you know, it's like, you know, it's like how was Mr. Within's classroom? Imagine, I'm not a university professor, but I'm saying, like, if in the future that option was open, it's like, how was Mr. Within's classroom? Well, he was, you know, he was trying to break, you know, the false premise. Can you imagine, just like, I don't know, I actually think maybe I won't be a good teacher, you know, because I have a sort of selfishness for the future. In the present, if you look at it, people will be like, okay, this is a shortcoming, right? If you look at it from the past, you know, shortcoming. But when a human attention, becomes revalued through the context of the potential of the future, I am telling you guys, it's like the way human beings are living in 2022. Imagine there right now, there is ways that we can live where we will be so much freer, efficient, and advanced, right? It's like, imagine a person is, let's say, like, I don't know, making a cake, right? And then at that moment when they're making a cake, they're thinking about, there's probably people on this planet who can make this cake better than me. Like 100%, there's people who've just like spent their whole lives making cakes, you know? So it's another way of saying in every moment there's another possibility of manifestation. There's a better way the moment can happen that we don't know about. Right now, I am considering the same for the human intelligence. There's ways our civilization could be happening right now that could be way better, and it's like if we were in a multiverse. Imagine there was a conscious multiverse. Imagine there was a multiverse where there were different parallel dimensions of Earth and they were interacting with one another. Imagine different parallel versions of Earth were competing. We're competing to see who builds which parallel universe of Earth leads or builds an advanced civilization. Anyways, let me see if I could open my notepad here and continue this episode. There we go. So whoever you are listening, if you're driving, you don't need to look at the video screen, you know, if you're listening to this when you're driving, but like if you are if you can look at the screen, you'll see the notepad. So earlier I was speaking about pretty much humanity extinction scenario, non-extinction scenario, right? So we have the humanity scenario, right? Bunch of creatures on a rock spinning in the middle of nowhere, pretty much. That's our starting point. If somebody says to me, you know, like, you know, what are human beings? We'll be like, man, we're just these creatures that just, you know, appeared on a planet and are now wondering what the meaning of the whole thing is. You know, the human species is like a child lost in the mall looking for its parents when it comes to cosmic intelligence. You know, the child cries until the solutions, you know, hopefully comes. The human species suffers until it discovers an advanced way of behavior, collective behavior. You know, for me, something is triggered in my psyche that has made me realize that the future's greatness depends on how we approach the collectivism of the species. You see, right now there's like 8 billion private worlds behind people's eyes, and in front of their eyes there's one public world we're all in. Okay, and now what seems to be the nature, the meaning of life is in some sense for the mind to activate the body, right? The purpose for the body would be in regards to how can it activate, how can it lead to its greatest performance of mind. It's as if temporary beings are rendered as performers, right? That means it's as if the person's like, man, I have a fear of going on the stage. It's as if from the beginning of our birth, we have been on the stage of the cosmos. We have been on the stage of the conscious waking state. You know, this world is not only alive, it is alive beyond objects and subjects. If you experientially access this, you meet the unknown and you work with the logos and the shamans and, you know, let's say, certain philosophers and writers and spiritual people on the planet. It's as if they're more fascinated by the unknown, direct, experiential prime mover of the moment than any idea or object association or subject association. Because when we look at an object, what is it? It's a material, it's a color, and it's a shape. Right? And if we were to give a sort of matter to the soul, in some sense, it's like there's a school of thought that says pretty much that the soul is not something that anybody can understand. Somebody would be like, I have a soul. It's like, you sure about that? What if the soul is beyond the idea of having, So anyways, back to this. We have humanity, all right? The humanity scenario pretty much divides into non-extinction and extinction. Now, extinction has two options, right? Efficient, inefficient. This is very important. This applies to all of it, actually. Efficiency and inefficiency, it's like a lens that could be placed upon the view of idea of extinction. It can also be placed on the idea of non-extinction. But here, I'll say when it comes to extinction, here, I'll make it, it's either going to be a great performance of the species, or it's going to be hopeless waiting. Pretty much when extinction becomes kind of verified, right, the species is going to become hopeless, right? If let's say everybody who's like working hard to advance, like to develop the world and all this, right? All those people who are being, I don't know, explorers, making new discoveries. It's as if, imagine when the idea of extinction comes, like a meteor is about to hit Earth, the person's like, man, there was so much to do, but we don't get a chance to do it, right? So a hopeless waiting, a sort of anguish, sort of, when it comes to extinctions, the psychology of the species is probably going to go into a hopelessness, then it's going to go into anguish, and then from anguish, it's going to go into, there's no other choice, to get to watch how the unknown devours the known, right? That's physical extinction, like the world being destroyed means that all our purposes for the planet and on the planet have become void, right? And it's here I would say, okay, another way, instead of saying great performance and hopeless waiting, I can say pretty much it's gonna be either gentle here, I'll make it better. Pretty much if extinction is coming, we can go out with style. That's a smooth approach, a sort of smooth flight. When it comes to extinction, if we can become very turbulent, like an airplane becoming turbulent, right? Like an airplane that, let's say the airplane is about to crash, and the pilot, instead of allowing the airplane to crash on land, which would be a turbulent sort of extinction, the pilot of the plane of existence smoothly navigates the plane of existence to at least land the airplane, doesn't work, if extinction was its engines turning off. Now, so anyways, that's pretty much extinction. There isn't too much to say about that. It's pretty much like, somebody turns off, like, the video game. Some force, something outside of us turns off the video game. It's pretty much beyond their control. Extinction is like watching the world happen to you. But non-extinction means that we have the privilege of happening to the world, right? Because the mind is like how the self sets the circumstances to the moment, the meaning of the circumstances in the moment. And the when it comes to the body, it's as if something other than self, the world, is setting the circumstances. So pretty much think of it as if the human species appeared on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and it's either telling itself what to do, or the world is telling it what to do. Do you know? When we were in nature, you look at animals, like animals don't doubt their ecosystem. You know, when I look at a bird, even a small bird, I'm like, look at the confidence this bird has, right? You know, and its confidence is in its assurance, which inevitably leads to trust. Trust is an ultimate stage of knowledge, guys. The unknown is the most ultimate, but I would say trust is that pre-stage before the unknown. That means if somebody says, why are you learning? Why are you knowing? Why do you care about knowledge? You know? The answer is clear now. Now, when it comes to, or here, guys, I should do something else. There's another way to just divide this out, this idea I'm saying. So we have extinction, we have non-extinction. Here, I'll begin from the beginning. Let's notice this. We have humanity. We have, let's say, extinction, and we have non-extinction. Then I would say we have humanized extinction. We have dehumanized extinction. When it comes to non-extinction, it also follows a similar path. A humanized non-extinction and a dehumanized non-extinction. And I'll explain what I mean by non-extinction. Humanized means, so extinction for humanized means human beings, the human destroys itself. Dehumanized extinction would be non-human factor. Like if robots destroyed, destroy the human species, that would be a dehumanized extinction. Okay. So non-human factors destroy humanity. Right? So pretty much extinction is like it's like self-destruction. Pretty much the creatures destroy themselves, the species, like human beings lead to their destruction, or again something outside of the human. So if aliens invade and human beings become extinct, that's dehumanized extinction, right? If robots again take over everything, that's like dehumanized extinction, right? If, for example, a time traveler, let's say a kind of like, I mean, this is a bit dark, but I'll share it because the idea is here. Imagine a criminal time traveler that came and destroyed people in the past, like wanted to make an extinction, wanted to make the species go extinct at an earlier time. Right? Even though that's, time travel it's like a game for the unwise. The wise realize pre-time. They realize before the time has to be a justification of the meaning for behavior. What is there? How could the mind create the concept of time and also feel it's in time? Like the mind creates the concept of, generates the experience of time for the body, but in some sense, technically, the mind was timeless before we considered time. So it's like some timeless field of activity is moving. It's like this field of, it's like space is alive, and what's moving in it is changing, and it's considering that change to be time, right? So, example would be human war. I'll put invasion, whether by technology, aliens, other dimensions, whatever. Right? So that pretty much sums it up for extinction. Now, non-extinction is where it gets interesting, right? And if somebody is futuristically inclined, like if you're a person who not only loves the future, but you're fascinated by it, because the attention goes where fascination is, like anybody who's a musician, like they heard something fascinated them to go towards that reality. So something is fascinating, an evolutionary animal to endlessly repeating its pattern, right? So humanized non-extinction would be another way of saying the immortal destiny of the species. Okay. So humanized, the ideal here is to preserve the biological, natural human being, right? That's a humanized non-extinction. That means if somehow in the future we find a way of not turning into robots to become immortal, not in some sense, becoming a collective mind to become immortal, right? But let's say somehow we found a sort of biological technology, like some sort of maybe like combination of chemicals that could enter the body, in which the body, the command it would give itself would be to just like heal instantaneously. That means I'm saying imagine an era where the concept of instantaneous healing isn't a myth. And I'm not talking about like Reiki healers. I'm talking about like literally like a human being. Imagine like there's a person who's ill and suffering, or let's say in the future there's going to be, let's say people go, like work hazards are not going to be work hazards anymore, right? Can you imagine like the confidence of an immortal being, doing a dangerous job, right? Right? It's like after it would be a thing where we are postponing death ad infinitum through technologies that render the natural biological entity as healthy, right? I'm saying it's as if we all know that the future is actually isn't just the secret, but the future holds all the secrets, right? The future is like the ultimate verification of whatever the mind does now. Humorously, I'll say, it would be fascinating if I could see thousands of years from now if my talks continued in what sort of human years these talks enter. But at the same time, by then, humorously, I could be, in a completely different, universal sector. Just, imagine, hopping around the cosmos, moved by the spirit of advancement, right? Or in some sense, I have a feeling actually on some level that this is perhaps my, like my vacation in an objective, subjective universe. It's as if I don't know why I have this feeling, but I feel this is my last time in manifestation. And it's kind of bizarre because on some mystical level, who I am is an unknown viewer, but it's as if when the unknown viewer understands its own presence, it doesn't have shape, right? It's as if they asked the multidimensional being, why did you become human? And the multidimensional being was like, that's all I could do at that moment. pretty much I'm trying to get to this idea that, you know, if we were to wonder about humanity's non-extinction scenarios, which would be a continuity of the human effort ad infinitum, if we manage, if like right now, 3,000, let's say 10,000 years from now, we're still, human beings are still like overpopulating, like we're overpopulating the universe, right? It's as if the human being the human species did not made more efficient decisions than inefficient decisions, and somehow, right, it's like, I would say, if you were a biological human being 10,000 years from now, most likely you will feel like you're living inside a paradise. I am telling you, it's like human history is like we're still close to the earliest domino, right? And it's like one domino was pushed, the human species came into manifestation, and all the dominoes are falling till infinity, right? That's the aim, right? You know, and when I was a young child, I remember there was this cartoon, you know, my cousins and my brother would watch, and it was Toy Story, right? And in it, there was like to infinity and beyond, right? There was that sentence. And as a child, you're like, yay, cool, I don't know what that means, but yay, it sounds cool. But that is the destiny of any sort of shape, right? It's as if the shape is like, I don't want to change. That's the best case scenario. I'm immortal without changing. Pretty much human beings will still be partying like 10,000 years from now. That's best case non-extinction scenario. Now, when we come to the dehumanized non-extinction scenario, this is very strange, because I feel somehow modern secular culture, global culture is focused on this, headed this way, right? It's as if the descendants of the atheist materialists are going to be how human consciousness somehow realistically was transferred into a technological body, right? So it's as if materialists, their grandchildren, are going to be immortal robots. Immaterialists, in some sense, they may not even be in a shape, like, how would I say it? Like, I mean, of course, there's different types of immaterialism, right? For example, I don't know if people know this, but in the Islamic tradition in ancient times, right? Let's say in the 6th century, right? There was the great Islamic movement, all right? Now, just like in Christianity, how we have Gnosticism being a sort of, in quotations, spiritual denomination of Christianity, Gnosticism being a spiritual denomination of Christianity, in what you call Sufism is like the Gnosticism of Islam, okay? And in Sufism, in the spiritual denomination of Islam, there's a story of how it all began, okay? And what the story is that the Prophet of Islam had in some sense imagined was like the Islamic Empire was in some sense being piloted by a human being that believed in one inconceivable truth, as if one source, right? One source to all that is, right? One inconceivable source to all that is. That means there is one God, right? That was the might of pretty much how in the 6th century the empires expanded based on their vision, right? You know, to me, religion is being so easily dismissed by secular society. Why? Because it's as if, like, you know what it is? Imagine somebody is hungry and they start eating like an artwork. Like, imagine somebody's gone into the like art gallery. Let's say they're looking at the Mona Lisa and there's no glass or anything, and the person's like, I'm hungry, I'm gonna start eating this artwork, right? And okay, and so imagine the security guard is like, what the hell am I looking at right now? The security guard runs in there and says, you cannot eat this artwork, right? This artwork is not something to eat, right? And it's another way of saying, like, religion is not something to accept or deny. That's the game of the psychological mind. That's not, do you see? It's like there's things that are, how can I tell you? You know, it's like in my past life I experienced religion, and in this life I'm saying, when I was younger, religion had a different implication to me, had a significance to me. And then, on some sense, there was a shift away from, do you see, like a internal religious context, and then it like, how would I tell you? It's like this world shakes you until you get to see the unknown. When you get to see the unknown, the ego shuts up. And then there's this strange silence, stillness, that is just watching how everything is being before there is any action. Speech is an action. Movement is, like, human life is a dynamic state, right? But we're here fighting over photographs of a dynamic state, like, it's impossible, right? It's like people are like, let me tell you, it's like truth is like a film, imagine. And now imagine somebody pauses like this film, takes a screenshot of like a single frame of the film and says, yo, this is my truth from now on. Every scene of this film has to be compared to this one scene in my mind. You see? But anyways, regardless of the implication, the idea is that the story of Sufism, which I was telling you, pretty much the prophet of Islam is journeying, and suddenly he gets a dream that in 1 week a strange group of people will arrive and he will meet them, right? So the way this story I heard it, it's as if like the prophet of Islam gets a dream that a sort of a unique cast of characters, a unique group of people is going to arrive, right? So, and guess what happens in a week of time? The Sufis, those who were oriented to nature's divinity rather than ideological divinity, they come to the prophet of Islam, and the prophet of Islam, you know, his empire looks at them and says, I believe in one, as if I believe in one truth, right? You know, at a time where the world was fighting over, you know, whether it's authorized multiplicity or not, right? And so the Sufis were actually those who, like, let's say you see the New Age community, like the person's like, you know, the other day, you know, I sat down and I was the oneness of the whole world. I was being everything, man. You know, it's like oneness all around, you know. So that oneness is actually the experience of God. You see, God is an inconceivable singular source. The experience of the human mind suddenly being like, wait a minute, I'm not just my body happening. I am how the whole moment is happening. I am how the whole universal sector is happening. It's as if people think I have this name and I have this personality, but I am a universe in disguise. You know, the intelligence of a universe in disguise. That's what the human being is actually. Now this, if it truly understands this, dehumanization will not be scary, right? Examples of dehumanization, what I would say, be non-human bodies for human minds. That's what dehumanized non-extinction means. It's a type of immortality where the biology of nature, that dimension, is either dismissed or ignored or unfortunately lost, right? There is this law in nature, I believe, that if a person is not grateful for what they have, they will miss out on what they have. If a person, let's say in a lifetime, like I think this is honestly the cure to any sort of depression. It's a like depression has a mathematical cure, guys. Has a mathematical remedy. Can you imagine Mr.Within mathematically, reduces, imagine, like, 70% of, depression statistics, all around the planet. And the way is hilarious, guys, that the person's like, okay, what is going on? I'm this evolutionary creature. After 4.5 billion years, I can be a phenomena, a conditional, a controllable phenomena, right? After 4.5 billion years, I'm a character in a video game. And this character in this video game had a beginning, which is birth, and will have an ending, that is death. So because the person's like, oh my god, death means I have a limited time in this world. I have a limited, everybody has a sort of, time limit to their to their soul's activities in this room, in this workstation we call Earth, multidimensional workstation, to be honest. So many dimensions are happening at the same time that on some level we're like, man, is there billions, like infinite gods, or is there one god, right? Is there infinite conceivable gods, or is there, one inconceivable god? And really that's the other side of the coin. When the Prophet of Islam, I'll get back to this story because I didn't finish it. When the Prophet of Islam says to the Sufis, to the dervishes that had come there, he tells them that he believes in one singular inconceivability of truth, right? The Sufis, the dervishes, they automatically, as if they have seen a superior being, they embrace Islam, right? So it would be as if, like, back in the day, there was still spiritual people, right? But their spirituality... Oh man, my notepad. Guys, my notepad its battery died. So I guess no more notepad. So see, just like this notepad has a battery life, human intelligence has a manifestation life, an animation life, It's like we are powered by our ability to happen in the environment as the environment. There was so much more to explain in the notepad, but pretty much I'll say this, that dehumanized non-extinction is another way where we realize we have not actually been the human body. We have been a presence of a field of mind. And imagine somehow through, let's say, evolution in the science of electromagnetism and energy, somehow we begin to realize that when a person, like the brain has different states, right? The brain is like, being like, okay, free waves for the world, It's as if the purpose of a breathing creature is to breathe in the world and then breathe it out. Breathe it in and breathe it out. It's like we can see the force that animates life as the cosmos, the universe breathing in. We could see in some sense destruction and all of this as if the universe is breathing out. A universal intelligence. In Vedic thought, it would be like, imagine an apocalypse would be like, how we're all in the dream of a god, and that god suddenly sneezes mid-dream. I don't know if this is actually possible, guys. I'd appreciate it if any of the viewers can figure out if when people are asleep they sneeze or not. Right? I mean, probably 100% like they should, right? I'm trying to think if one has consciousness to their nose, does the body still react? It's so strange, when I wonder about how attention is moving us. It's like on some level, it's not a physical movement, so all that it can be is a dynamic, like an endless consideration. So, guys, now we're getting to the main part, of this episode, where I'm going to explain the theories of consciousness, and my notepad died. Oh my god. Alright, hang on, guys. I'm gonna go charge my notepad, but, let me see what I can do. I guess I'll keep it for another episode, and I'll just vocally share it. So I want to explain to viewers a sort of diagram, okay? And if you look at the screen, I'll post the diagram there. When it comes to theories of consciousness, it's like, to understand this diagram tells you how far we've come as a species. Okay. Okay. So, by the way, whoever's listening, I would recommend that grabbing a piece of paper and taking notes from this part of the talk. Okay. All right. Theories of consciousness. All right. So the theories of consciousness. Divide like a tree, like if the trunk of the tree is the theories of consciousness, the theory of consciousness. The theory of consciousness branches out into a theory called dualism, and a theory called monism. Okay, this is pretty much obvious, but at the time of the development of these considerations, it was not. When it comes to dualism, okay, and so in case people don't know certain terms here, consciousness. Let's see how the dictionary, defines consciousness. Who knew, guys? Consciousness is a noun. The consciousness, the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings, the awareness or perception of something by a person, the fact of awareness by the mind of itself and the world. Okay, so this is consciousness. So it's as if these are the, let's say, the contending theories of our time. Now, when it comes to dualism, what is dualism? Dualism is how the mind and body are different kind of things, right? So inspired by René Descartes, pretty much there's two types of dualism. There's dualism where the mind is dependent on the body, and then there's a dualism where the body is dependent on, where the mind is independent of the body. So property dualism is pretty much saying the reason we're experiencing this, okay, property dualism is how the brain is projecting the mind, and when the body dies, the mind also dies. The mind is being given the properties of the brain to some degree. Sorry, not the properties of the brain, but I'm saying it's as if it's dependent on the body. So it's as if mind it's like a property, let's say dualist, can't understand the concept of the mind without the idea of the body, right? The body is like prior, more important than the mind, right? But when it comes to substance dualism is like the mind is in its own dimension. The mind is its own world, independent of the body. There's something here I'll read for you. It says substance dualism is the doctrine that the things that possess mental properties are distinct from and irreducible to the things that possess physical properties. For example, that the human mind or soul is distinct from and irreducible to the human body or any part of it, such as the brain. It's like the mind is made of a substance in another dimension, you know? Or the mind is a completely different substance, or the way the mind is it's like the mind is standing differently than the body in substance dualism. But when it comes to property dualism, it's as if the mind reflects a lot of the properties of the body. I'm going to read something here for you. It says substance dualism claims that the mind, in brackets soul, is a separate identity than the physical human being that will live on past their deterioration of past the deterioration deterioration of bodies. While property dualism claims that the mind, although different than the physical human framework, is still linked and thus will end with our death. So it's another way of saying either the mind is in a different dimension, it didn't matter if you were born or not, or if you have a body or not, or the mind is here only because you have a body, right? That's the difference. Substance dualism, it's as if like pretty much it's the mind being an independent dimension. Property dualism, our minds are the sounds of our bodies. But I am more on the substance dualism side. For me, it's like any ideological system that understands the unknown was in the room before the known. That's like, you know, the unknownists of this realm are, I am like just, and the unknown is where greatness is waiting. The unknown is where the future is waiting. The unknown is where divinity is waiting. Where God is waiting for religion. So this is in regards to the dualism, right? So pretty much we've divided consciousness into two dimensions. And are these two dimensions dependent on each other, or are they independent? Mystics, their consideration is that it's completely independent. You know, that what the real self is an unconditional freedom that is being the quality of how the whole moment is just being the whole moment. And so, you know, that's dualism, guys, you know. In the philosophy of mind, dualism is the theory that the mental and the physical, or mind and body, or mind and brain, are in some sense radically different kinds of thing. Because common sense tells us that there are physical bodies, and because there is intellectual pressure towards producing a unified view of the world, one could say that materialist monism is the default option. Okay. Let me see if I can find a better definition, because see, sometimes you can define things in accordance to their opposites, but sometimes, you know, you can define something that is. Let me see if there's another way of finding this. The doctrine that the world of reality consists of two basic, opposed, and irreducible principles that account for all that exists. imagine in the future there comes this movie called The Duel of the Dualists, and it's pretty much, property dualistic, dualist philosophers kind of like debating it out with substance dualists. Now onto monoism. Monoism is a polite way of saying oneness. is a more classy way of saying oneness, So, monoism, I guess, it branches out into two branches. So pretty much we had the theory of consciousness. We had the one branch becoming two branches, dualism and monoism. And then dualism, in some sense, leading us to just kind of an infinite chaos and order scenario of understanding. And I would say when it comes to monoism, here, guys, I'm gonna read something for you. It's I don't know why the websites have an issue. Okay, this is workable. I'll read this. Monoism states that all the existing things in the universe are created from a singular reality and are reducible to that reality. Accordingly, the fundamental character of the universe is unity. Dualism, on the other hand, advocates existence of two mutually irreducible substances. That means there's like two irreducible dimensions, right? It's as if like the mystery of consciousness is either made from two irreducible dimensions, right? The universe of matter, the universe of let's say mind. And when it comes to monoism is a sort of reducible universe. Two dimensions that can never contact each. It's as if two dimensions, two inconceivable dimensions, or excuse me, one inconceivable truth or two conceivably separate dimensions. Pretty much, monoism and dualism, guys, it's pretty much this human psychology personifying itself through mathematics. Right, it's either one dimension or it's two dimensions, right? Now, there is something more to this, actually. I'll keep reading it. Let me see. So, from monoism, we go to materialism and we go to idealism. All right. I actually made notes for this part before, recording the episode. I'm pretty much reading that here, and some stuff online. So, I guess we have idealism, and idealism would be another way of saying, like, the mind is in the room before matter, right? Or it's another way of saying objects depend on subjects to exist. Right? So, for example, an idealist is, in some sense, it's as if like, everything depends on God. like religion is an idealist sort of view. You know, it's strangely like, do you know religion is acting, is like, you know what's strange? It's as if religion you know, it's like the talk has reached that point where I'm noticing what's strange about religion. Oh man. Pretty much the human experience either believes in a subject to be the ultimate position, so you become an idealist. It means an idea is the is the context of let's say the singular meaning. You know, religion is like how a subject is more important than an object. Okay, science is how an object is more important than a subject. And philosophers are like, they're both important, but there's also more. There's something more important than objects and subjects, you know. Philosophers are pretty much like, you know, representatives of the mystics, you know. You know, the known is beautiful, the unknown is beautiful. It's all based on just how the attention touches sight. You know, or how attention receives sight, right? We can have a very, let's say, smart person, but the person, the way they receive sight is, for example, you know, they like, how would I tell you? These words that I'm saying can never be me. You know, it technically can't be anyone, right? Because if the actual, like, life is a video game and we're like, okay, what's moving the character, what's moving the video game character, and we realize that there's somebody sitting behind a computer screen from a different dimension than the pixelated character moving the pixelated character on the screen, right? So imagine we are the pixelated character and we're wondering about what is moving us in this elemental video game, right? And so, from, I would say, the idealist monist view, right, it's as if immaterial, a sort of immaterial truth to matter. That's what religion means. Honestly, that's the summarization of religion. All religions, pretty much. And you know what's hilarious? Like, even though, you know, people have been like, hey man, why are you worshipping, like, you know, you know, this ancient, you know, let's say Vedic god, this ancient Egyptian god, right? And it's as if truth has been outsourced to a shape. Do you know? That means there's human beings on this planet feeling they are a shaped entity, and there's some human beings who are like, okay, the mind is acting like space, and it's a space where matter has a contrast, so it's dualistic. And another way of saying, like, one of the most beautiful examples of duality is a portal. You know, in my earlier talks, I would say, imagine you enter a portal, but you enter it sideways. So imagine, usually in movies, how do you see people entering portals? They just walk straight into it like a door, right? But imagine you were walking in like sideways to the portal, where it's as if your left shoulder would go into the portal before your left shoulder. And imagine you stood in the middle of the, exactly symmetrically in the middle of a portal, where your left eye was in one universe and your right eye was in another universe, and you were trying to wonder about, okay, what is experiencing this, right? And that's really what the human scenario is, right? It's as if, like, if we didn't have minds, that we wouldn't even have the concept of extinction. There wouldn't even be an analysis of fear, right? That means you can, it's like extinction due to, let's say, inefficiency is like too easy. It's too easy to fail. Like every speed, like the easiest thing has been, like, to not see what else there is, you know. it may be strange, from the religious perception, you see it's as if like there's the concept of possession from a religious connotation. And then it's like you look at modern society and people are possessed by, in some sense, emotions. Do you know? Like if you ask the average man, are you your thoughts? He'll be like, yes, I am. Are you your body? Yes, I am. Do you have a soul? No, I don't see anything around, If I can't see it in front of my eyes and behind my eyes, it doesn't exist. Like that's the childish attitude the species has now, right? This is my, bias. But what I'm saying, pretty much, we're like, okay, there's a, creature on a rock. It's noticed it's on a rock. That's what we call consciousness. How has it noticed it? Chaos and order. Hey, dualism comes into the picture. Oh my God, it's all just one singular event that can't be defined or can be defined, and that's the idealism and materialism of monism, right? So I'm going to read for you the differences between identity theory, behaviorism, and functionalism. So I've written here, behaviorism, all claims about mind and body can be expressed in terms of behavior. I've written this in quotation, so it's a quote from something from online. All claims about mind and body can be expressed in terms of behavior. So a behavior, when it comes to behaviorism, right, it's as if like the person's like, okay, not only it's just one thing, like there's levels to materialism, right? Like religious people think like being a materialist is just like you're one kind of materialist. The sooner the species acts like what it deserves, which is to be to activate its birthright, which is multidimensional experience. It's as if who said we are not multidimensional beings, And this curiosity has been denied. It's like imagination, by making it different to reality, we have made a part of our minds an outsider by considering it's a fabrication or a non-existence, right? It's as if there's a real entity experiencing the day physically. Let's say somebody walking in a park, but then there's all the psychological events that are happening behind the eyes of the person, right? And so we are treating the psychological events that are happening, how the mind is happening as unreal and how the body is happening as real, because our reality is only based on objects. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's as if the species is denying itself greater questioning of its nature, right? It's like the human species is like a child that is looking at the cosmos like its parents, and it's saying like, I know everything, and the parents are like, this kid, it's as if we are actually, the species is behaving like a young child, which I would say, and people are going to be like, why are you saying that, Mr. Within? I'll say, because if we did a survey of what people thought is the greatest state of being, I think everybody would agree on playfulness. You see, when life materialistically is meaningless, it becomes like a wonderland, right? It's as if, sure, there is no meaning to matter moving in space, but there's change, and change creates novelty, and the new is kind of like the transcendence of, the capabilities of matter. It's like, who knew the destiny of matter was to become a subject noticing itself? Given a podcast, like who knew? Who knew that if you add a little bit of light, to a planet, endless types of creatures arise. Who knew? And you know what it is, guys? I think the aliens, if there are aliens, right? I'll get back to the branches of materialism. Monism and materialism, but I'll tell you, if there are aliens, guys, like imagine right now aliens, they're like watching us from another dimension. They're like, these human beings don't have the ability to believe beyond their sensory perception, right? So imagine there's endless like types of extraterrestrials, and they're just chilling in dimensions that we can't see, you know? Imagine, okay? Now, imagine these extraterrestrials are all waiting. Like imagine the invisible eyes in the clouds are watching the human species, right? Let's say galactic eyes, right? And it's like we have a galactic audience as a species in our performance of an advanced civilization, which is pretty much like the inevitable destiny of matter, right? Behaviorism, I'll get back to this. Behaviorism, pretty much, how is a material being in a singular material world, in some sense experiencing consciousness, and in some sense, for the behaviorist, it's not just limited to the body, to the brain. It's not just limited to the body, but it's all the behaviors like culture, society, everything outside of the human being that is in some sense leading to some sort of psychological shift of the inside of the human, right? Of the inner realms. And maybe before even behaviorism, I should have talked about identity theory. So pretty much, let's say 3 types of materialistic, monistic perspectives, right? So, okay, I explained behaviorism. I think people know what behaviorism is, but I'll get back to it again. Identity theory. So the notes I have here say states. This is again from my mind. States and processes of the mind are identical to states and processes of the brain. All right. So in identity theory, the brain is the driver of the mind, the driver of consciousness. Okay, it's not that, it's technically like before free will, the brain's existence is like before, it's like standing to the, I would say, identity theorists. Say in identity theory, mental states are identical with brain states. Okay. So pretty much the brain is the source of consciousness, the main source of consciousness. For the behaviorists, they're considering outside factors. So here, certain mental states are defined in terms of external behaviors. I mean, it's like when you see the scenario, then everything makes sense here. Functionalism. Mental states are defined in terms of input-output relationship. I'm going to read something for the listeners here. It's pretty fascinating. This is from online. Although behaviorism and functionalism have important differences, for example, behaviorism de-emphasizes internal mental states and emphasizes external behaviors. Right? That means it's like the behaviors in the outer realms are way more important than the behavior in the inner realms. Here it says both behaviorism and functionalism emphasize the outputs of consciousness. The difference is that in behaviorism, these outputs are always external and visible, and by extension measurable, whereas in functionalism, the outputs of consciousness may either be external behaviors or other internal mental states, right? So it's as if, what I'm trying to say is, okay, we had the identity theorist who was like, yo, the brain's telling me, the brain's, my captain, right? And then we have the behaviorist, which is in some sense being like, okay, what does the brain lead to? The brain leads to expression. Here they use the word output, but it's like the brain expresses itself, right? And the expression of the brain is called behavior, and behavior can be measured, you know. This is why, like, somebody who's truly a psychologist is actually, it's like they gotta maintain their honor as a behaviorist. It's fascinating. It's like human beings are just this unknown viewer, and wherever this attention of this unknown viewer goes, over time it begins to consider many angles of meaning, right? It's as if like the secret of concentration is that when you concentrate on anything, right, and you start off with single pointedness, and then eventually you realize what else there is. In concentration, the attention looks at one point and it becomes that point. You know, that means if a person stares at a water bottle long enough, in their mind there will come through this, there will come this stream of, conscious thought, where they're going to be there. It's as if the person's going to for a second forget who they are. Let's say in 1 nanosecond it happens, but for a nanosecond the person was just staring at a bottle of water for hours, that for 1 second in those hours the person just wasn't, like, they had no sense of identity, and they were just attention looking at a bottle of water, for example. You see, the nature of concentration is that if you do it right, you begin to notice your inner realms change. But if your inner realms don't change, it's as if everybody has a sense of progress because we know our limits, even though we may not be attempting to surpass them. There was this anime show, I think it was called Black Clover. There was a character in it, you know, there was this kid who was, was about to die, and then he was saved, and the kid felt like he had failed or something. And this great warrior in the show goes and says, to be weak is nothing to be ashamed of, but staying weak is, right? The future can heal the mind. The idea of the future, guys. And any ideological system that doesn't care for the future ability of the species is an inefficient ideological system. Whether it's like, let's say, pure materialistic anarchy, or if it's pure immaterialistic faith, right? That means it's as if we have to honor the presence of humanity in the cosmos before we have any claim to what we think we are or what we think truth is, right? Imagine everybody who had played chess ever, anybody who had at least played chess once, okay? Imagine all these people began to look at civilization as a chess game and wondering, how do all members of a species play their chess moves in such a way where the advanced civilization just arises? You see, behind our eyes, truth is very easy to exist, right? A person can, look at the sun and be like, God, is that you? Like, you know what I mean? The ancient Egyptians were like tripping, Can you imagine a time traveler goes back to ancient Egypt, right? And the people are like, why have you come back? Have you come back to save us, from this life we're living? And the time traveler's like, no, I just got you guys sunglasses. So when you worship the sun, you don't dismiss your own sight, right? Kidding. Imagine a time traveler goes back to when Egypt, like, we're considering the narrative that it was like the history of Egypt is like evidently slaves made the pharaoh's pyramid, right? Imagine the time traveler goes back and they're like, have you come to save us and free us from our misery and suffering and enslavement? And the time traveler's like, nah, man, there was a sale and I just got a lot of sunglasses, you know, so I thought. Guys, another benefit of joining the channel membership is I think I'm going to start also, you know, making, you know, humor-oriented entries, you know. Man, this world moves in so many ways that if we predict it, the past just gets an ego rush of feeling it knows. Really, it's all about contentment with the unknown. That means there's so many ways that life can move, and being a human being on this planet, it's actually very fragile and sensitive. And when I say fragile and sensitive, I'm not trying to say like, let's justify postmodernism. What I'm saying, it's as if like, think of it this way, simple dimensions, the more you add simple dimensions together, it's as if complex dimensions arise. So anything we look at it, any idea, any concept, right? We're starting from like the concept is in an abstract level, right? And in some sense, the human mind, the nature of how the mind, the truth seeker is wondering about the source. You know, that's really it. I think anybody who wonders about how the moment of their consciousness is happening, they become an incredibly advanced being, you know? Because when you realize there's dehumanized states of intelligent activity, it's another way of saying, man, this whole time the human being has been telling a story to itself, not realizing life is alive in other dimensions. And the more conscious we become, the more we realize the purpose and destiny of our mind. If somebody says, Mr.Within, what's the purpose of 8 billion bodies? I'll be like, okay, sure, immortality. Or in some sense, graceful, natural continuity and passage. Right? The idea is like we're such an advanced species that all the issues we have with not preserving our human nature or the natural world, like we solve those. You know? I'm telling you, an advanced civilization is like the species is living in the greatest in the greatest setting. Honestly, humor is surprise, guys. Like, people don't realize in yogic thought, there is a state when it's like post-enlightenment state where pretty much like the person laughs and cries at the same time. And the reason they're laughing and crying at the same time, it's like the person realizes in their complex simulation of a life filled with suffering, a very simple truth to it all. Right? It's as if, imagine I'll give you an example. For example, I'm here being like, come on, human species, let's build an advanced civilization and see what it looks like, right? But it could be that, imagine I suddenly realize that the advanced civilization already exists, right? It's as if the future is ahead of us. That means it's happening ahead of us, you know? Right now, guys, I'm being the memory of my future self. I'm being a live streamed memory for my future self, you know. Imagine one day, you know, you opened your eyes, you know, and you went outside and you saw a giant robot shaped like a question mark fighting another giant robot shaped like an exclamation point. You know, imagine like a question mark with arms and an exclamation point with arms, and they're both like giant robots higher, like bigger than the biggest, let's say, skyscrapers, right? And you just opened your door to go read the, you know, let's say, sort of, you know, to go get a sort of old school newspaper, you know, and you're like, wait a minute, something's off. There's giant robots fighting in the city. Can you imagine a student is late to class? The teacher's like, why are you late, kid? You know, the student's like, you know, there were giant robots blocking, you know, the street, man. You know, it wasn't my fault. And imagine a giant robot foot just breaks into the school, like, in the parking lot, and everybody in the school evacuates, like. A question mark is combating an exclamation point. The giant robot exclamation point robot is like a metaphor for how we are believing insight. You know, and the question mark is how, regardless of our beliefs, this is like a sort of changing world, right? It's as if the person's like, man, I tried to believe, you know, in religion. I tried to believe in other ideological systems, you know, secular ideological systems. I tried to believe in any ideal, but I realized it's impossible. And imagine they ask that person, why is it impossible? Because every day that you wake up, there are new dimensions of perception being added to your memory, therefore rendering you as a new self. So it's as if a person who has a belief on Monday, and they wake up and they wonder about their beliefs on Tuesday, the one who is believing has changed from Monday. What I'm trying to say is that it's like that which is believing is changing as much as the belief will change in time, you know. I'm going to read something about functionalism to make sure I fully covered all the points on the diagram. Functionalism is the doctrine that what makes something a thought, desire, pain, in brackets, or any other type of mental state depends not on its internal constitution, but solely on its function, or the role it plays in the cognitive system of which it is a part. More precisely, functionalist theories take the identity of a mental state to be determined by its causal relations to sensory simulations, other mental states, and behavior. So I guess this is I'll say, make this the last point, the major difference between functionalism and behavioralism. As if there was a functionalist and behaviors in the room, what would the conversation look like, you know? The behavioralist would be like, all right, consciousness cannot be known if we cannot define it, right? And so how we define consciousness is by what it's leading to, which is behavior. the behaviorist has to see the behavior happen in front of its eyes. The behaviorist is like an outer realm focused measure, you know. But the functionalist is like what is influencing in general, overall, the side. I would say. One person's like, let's see how this creature behaves, and then we would know, in some sense, what consciousness is. The functionalist is like, we need to know all the dimensions that influence the psyche. So that means whether it's mental images or sensory perceptions. You see, functionalism is a dualist functionalism, guys. Is a runner-up for the state of mind that I think is going to advance civilization. Dualist functionalists are going to become pretty much the pilots of the species. And what I mean by this is that, in some sense, we have to consider all possibilities. That means this branch that I was explaining to you, like if you look at this, alright guys, let me reorganize language here. The theory of consciousness is the trunk of a tree. It has two branches, dualism and monism. Duality has two branches, divides into two universes. Substance dualism was, in some sense, the mind is beyond the body. Property dualism, the mind isn't beyond the body. For monism, again, two branches, two universes. Idealism, the subject is the object is the subject that was here before the object. And for materialism, we have the object was here before the subject, and three ways of how this object is in this subject. Okay. One is being because the brain is happening, the other being because of the behavior of the ecosystem and the environment and all that can be captured in the range of behaviorism. And then we have functionalism, right? Which is inner and outer influences of all sorts being considered at the same time. That means what is truly functioning in this creature could be way beyond its measurable behavior, right? So these are four universes, okay? It's as if we are left with four universes for the theory of consciousness. At least in accordance to this diagram. For me, the substance dualist functionalist, excuse me, I should say it differently. The substance dualists and the material functionalists, these are going to be, here I'll write it down, material functionalists, something I'm going to talk about probably in the future. And substance dualists. The substance dualists are in some sense advancing the mind of the species, and the material functionalists are advancing the body of the species. Pretty much think of it this way, guys. A scenario which never in history has been possible to even fathom, but I'll share it with you, right? Imagine like back in the day there was kings and okay, imagine right now the government was a sort of kingdom, okay? And imagine if one day everybody woke up and instead of there being one king, there were 8 billion queens and kings, you know? So it would be something where imagine every person felt like a king of their world. But when I say king, I'm not talking about the egoic kind of like, tomato concentrate like dripping from the chin level of a king. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm not talking about the ignorant archetype, the ignorant denomination of the archetype of the king. I'm talking about, like, imagine a king's responsibility. Pretty much the king back in the day, or the queen back in the day, was a human being that was identifying as the whole kingdom, right? It's as if like the anger of a king is very different than the anger of someone living in that kingdom. The anger of the kingdom is the edge of the walls of the kingdom. Do you know? The anger of the king is the edge of the walls of the kingdom. So I'm saying, imagine a world where it was just, there were no other people. Everybody was just the king and queen. They felt responsible for the kingdom of mankind's journey into the world. Pretty much, if humanity is in a battle, I would say against, it's like conception, I should say this way, the known and the unknown, they are in some sense poetically, I'm saying only poetically, in combat. Okay, it's another way of saying, like, visible objects are fighting invisible subjects. Do you know? And it's another way of saying the relationship of an existential being with non-existence. Right? Non-existence is like that which we are. The whole species is just like marching through, trying to, in some sense, be able to stand our presence in this battlefield. So that's for the theories of consciousness part of this episode, you know. Every person has to realize they have an inner life and an outer life, which are being like the two wings of a bird that allow it to fly when synchronized, right? Pretty much the idea is that we consider what our greatness would look like, and then the inner realms have no choice. It's as if like when you wonder about the future, you have no choice when it comes to novelty. It's like they say some people have imagination. No, some people, imagination comes to them, do you know? And sometimes it's based on the position you hold on, like let's say in the chessboard of karma. On the chessboard of karma. To be honest, the purpose of this YouTube channel has ended up being just how do we get, the most advanced humanity towards the most advanced civilization. And I have realized the role of the civilized human being is to now begin exploring the inner realms and the nature of mind. The nature of mind may reveal that how we are being an intelligent being, the essence of that intelligence has nothing to do with the human ideal, but that's okay because what we are is a natural system, and the blessing of a natural system is that it maintains itself. It's like the more a person was honest, decent, and kind, the more, like back in the day, let's say in Vedic times, the gods would, in some sense, watch over this person. The idea was simply that it's like the potential of ability. If a person, let's say, doesn't believe in their own greatness, let's say there's a human being that doesn't believe in their own greatness, they're like, I can't believe it, man. It's not for me. My own greatness isn't for me or something. Honestly, when a person realizes what they don't know, then they can know something new in that dimension. We are a rhythmic species. We are a species that's like, if we in a dolphin parallel universe, it's just jumping in and out of water. The body's activating in the conscious waking state, and in some sense, deactivating in deep sleep unconscious. There's no saying, like, it's like an advanced civilization. It's not like a cake where we can say the exact ingredients it needs. Everything starts off as probabilities. It's as if, like, let's say, let me tell you this. It's as if, like, if you saw a chess master, and I'm not a chess master, but I have, read some articles online in regards to how do chess masters think. Right. And it's as if, like, people think the chess master, let's say, what's his name? Kasparov, when he was facing the first, like, robot playing chess against the human, right? He won against the robot, and Kasparov was calculating 3 moves per second or something, and the robot was calculating, like, 1,000 moves per second, right? And so Kasparov wins the first time. The second time, when they come around, Kasparov loses to the robot, right? But the idea is that it's not just you look at a position on a chessboard and you wonder about in how many different ways and angles, like what is the full 360 movement of this piece, It's also that they, in some sense, let me tell you, it's as if chess masters are people who have organized the patterns of possibility. It's as if they have a way more organized system of looking at the chessboard, I've had nights where I've just kind of like stared out of my balcony and been like, it just goes on and on and on and on, as if like the world is very discreetly, it's like the karma for the future generations is like what will combat the artificial dimensions in culture and global society would be in some sense the inner uprising of a sort of new natural human being, right? It's as if like there's another evolutionary phase left, right, in accordance to nature, which is the collective nature abidance. So it would be as if like it's like we are a self experiencing ourselves in the world naturally, but imagine there's a natural way where the world can experience itself to the self. There is so many ways that human beings have not realized how to even interact with nature, right? Pretty much like when a person wonders, how am I being a subject in this moment right now, like the sense of self or ego. It's as if you see that there was just an elemental dimension, right? And there was like an objective physical dimension. And this objective physical dimension, the moment it noticed itself, it began simultaneously being a subjective dimension. It's honestly like there was first one film running, and this film was the physical universe, right? The physical world, the physical outer realms. And then at some point in history, when the creature noticed it's being a creature, there was an inner film. Another film started playing simultaneously, right? And then this film, as it was going, this was consciousness in the most primitive man, and eventually when we let's say transcended the agricultural phase, you know, oh man, an object held a subject, and now that subject is moving that object, and the subject realizes that the object was in space, and so the subject is rendered in space. We are attention in the void, watching the world change. I don't know what it is, guys. I think it's like ever since my mind envisioned the advanced civilization of humanity, it's as if there's something it's as if I can never, till the end of this lifetime, stop talking about it. Because it is so vast. It's as if, imagine something is going to happen in the future that is beyond everybody's, expectation, beyond everybody's ability to fathom. Right? It's as if maybe Poet Scott saw a glow of the glimpse, you know. Saw a glow of a glimpse of it. But in reality, all that man can do is to realize the decency of just all children. It's like there's no good or evil in newborn children, you know. The personality is a layer that's kind of like Photoshop added. Pretty much anybody who seeks enlightenment, you're going to realize you're an unknown being, and then suddenly you're going to notice your attention experientially being different in the outer ones. Alexander the Great has this story where it seems that he was, when he passed away, it was tradition to, put great warriors, on a boat, and burn the boat, and the boat would slowly go into the ocean and then go into the sea or something. And so Alexander the Great, instead of having his arms crossed, as was the tradition, he tells people to, when he passes away, for his arms to be open, right? And so suddenly in that time, something happens where people were in town, were yo, why was Alexander the Great's arms open? Why was his corpse and then there's this, I don't know, idea where it's Alexander the Great said, I was an emperor who had it all, but everybody leaves empty-handed. That is what death means. This is why compassion has a supreme meaning, right? It's as if shall we enter the future benevolently and incredibly efficiently. Or shall we allow inefficiencies to, in some sense, lead to the emotional demise? Right? It's as if the dimensions, all the dimensions of your mind, when they can trust how they're being present, I would say that's when true ability activates. There's a quote from Aristotle I want to share. The quote says, "Suffering becomes beautiful when anyone bears great calamities with cheerfulness, not through insensibility, but through greatness of mind." Every child on this earth should wonder about not the greatness of their own mind only, but the greatness of the mind of their species. Imagine right now, like, you know what's hilarious? It's as if in an inefficient world, or I should say it, in a artificial world, nobody is, or I'll say it here, in a defeated world, nobody is victorious. Let's say human beings right now, they go on the global stage and they say, I'm victorious, do you know, right? It's as if as long as one of us is suffering, we were not advanced enough to solve that problem, right? An advanced civilization, like, let me tell you, if there was a sort of global command center for human, for let's say civilization 1.0, like right now civilization 1.0 is still fragmented through nationalism, right? It's as if the behavior of a part of the land became a sort of jersey with colors, you know. But imagine in the future, everybody realizes, all right, everybody's being a human, a member of the human species, and all members of the human species deserve the most advanced before their exit out of here, right? So the logic of the advanced civilization is like, oh my God, all human beings are tourists in elemental manifestation, and so what is the most? How can we have them experience the greatest modes of reality? It's as if, imagine a being so advanced, right, that shouted in some sense, like, build the advanced civilization, you know. Now imagine 8 billion kings and queens, each commanding themselves in their own inner realms, build an advanced civilization, right? And when I say advancement, guys, you know, like how they say there was a spirit to love, a spirit to hate. I will tell you, there is a spirit to advancement. That means they asked this person, imagine like two metaphysicists were speaking, and one of them were like, hey man, do you have guardian angels? And imagine the person says, no, but I have my future selves guarding me. The presence of attention, the resurrection of worlds behind our eyes. Guys, there is something so mysterious and divine about human life and we can try to cage it in any object or subject, you know. Storytellers will try to, in some sense, build the Tower of Babylon towards an unknown experiential truth, and they will realize that we cannot reach it through language. The greatest thing that human beings can do with language is allow language to be a voice for the hidden, to unravel the mysterious dimensions of Earth with the recognition that we are as mysterious as the dimensions we're unraveling. Do you know, it's as if in certain episodes I say roars of the soul. That is like the future shouting at the past to wake up, you know. mean, I think it would be a very cool, experience. Imagine right now, like if I said like, imagine like the civilization, like imagine an advanced civilization, right? And you open your eyes in the morning and you enter the advanced civilization, you are accessing the advanced civilization. And the advanced civilization is so advanced that the concept of fear, the concept of suffering, the concept of defeat and failure, and all of these have become obsolete. And so it's as if a species that realized, that was more fascinated by the potential of its ability than by, in some sense, how memories are, how attention is connected to the past. It's as if the past is gone, but it is alive in our minds. Now, when a human being wonders about the unknown, every person, I would say, true mastery or true genius, in the sense of, like, imagine from a warrior's perspective. Imagine you were, let's say there was a child who, their father had been, in battle and had never returned home. And this child was so angry, right, that this child took to back in the day, in like medieval times, I'm saying, guys, or not medieval times, like imagine like samurai culture or something, right? And imagine whatever, this kid just takes a sword, goes into the forest where there's nothing there, and with an incredible rage and anger starts hitting the sword on trees, right? And it's as if his hand hurts, his grief releases, and then suddenly he realizes to fulfill the destiny of the past is to, in some sense, do something that the past will be fascinated by. Just the belief in an advanced future is enough to allow what we consider the ego to be a part of the equation. It's as if we're existing in 4 dimensions. In one dimension, we're existing as space. In one dimension, we're existing as matter. In another dimension, we're existing as, I would say, a sort of the dualistic mind. Chaos and order are like how the world becomes colored. And there's also an infinite room. It's another way of saying, like, in this parallel universe, sure, I was a temporary being, but in another parallel universe, my eyes are what would the term be? Primordial. There's this concept that certain traditions have had, which is the search for the original Earth, right? As if, like, these yogis were like, man, what is the ultimate reality? For example, in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's like this next level person saying, in some sense, that this world that we're experiencing, a sensory world, is the shadow of the real world. That means we are in the shadow of higher dimensions, but we are the light of lesser dimensions. We are the light to lesser shadows, and we are a shadow to greater lights. This is the fractalization of, I would say, a sort of model for a divine hierarchy. That means it's as if we cared for freedom, and when we find ultimate freedom, because we are being it, there's no ultimate freedom to look for. The referring to subjective and your inner realms change. That means enlightenment is hilarious. It's as if you become a different being by realizing you were never just the memory. You're not your memories. You're like, there's a viewer here, right? It's as if like our mind is acting like space, and we're like, okay, mind, you're gonna act like space, so we're gonna theorize consciousness is alive as space. And imagine in that moment, it's like we hear an applause in the cosmos, and we're like, where's this applause coming from? And it's as if space is applauding for its own developments. I think it would be interesting to wonder what would it be, what kind of world would it be that the mind acts like a portal. Not only a portal to the past and the future, when the mind looks at the past, that's like memory. When the mind looks at the future, that's imagination. But ultimately, it's one mind, and these are how attention pilots it. It's as if we've reached a point in how a species is considering itself that the potential of the species it's like the potential of the species is a potential that is real. That the mind's task is in some sense guide the body, and the body's task is to serve the mind of the species. Really. In an advanced civilization, the ether would be so advanced that on some level it would be as if the great, like if this world is a simulation, it's as if an instantaneous invisibility is the only truth. It's like realizing like space is present, even though it can't be defined. We are in the presence of the undefinable, which is another way of saying we thought just the human being was, important to look at its life. It's like the cosmos is alive. This world is alive. And what spirit is in some sense when a being enters a new dimension, that which is aware of its entrance comes for interaction. Right? So it's another way of saying that in the domains of the mind, you should be grounded in your outer realms as a biological human being, and in your inner realms, you should be grounded as just, at best, the presence of a witness. You're just a watcher, an unknown watcher in the inner realms. That means if you're in your inner realms, you see a picture of an alien, you think like that's real alien. You see, you are the unknown watcher of the known pictures that come and go. There was this person named, what's his name? Papaji, this yogi, and he went to this mountain, Arunachala, and Papaji was this guy this young yogi who felt that in his mind, he felt that the god Krishna would come to him and he would dance with Krishna, right? He had that sort of inner realms. And so one day this incredibly liberated and realized person by the name of Ramana Maharshi is walking in the mountain, and he suddenly, the same time this kid is dancing, Ramana Maharshi has come to him, right? And Ramana Maharshi tells Papaji, what are you doing? Why are you dancing, right? And Papaji says, Krishna has come. That means Papaji is saying that God has come. God is in the moment, present, dancing with me. He's saying like Arjuna level of a mindset, where it's like the avatar of Krishna has appeared to him. So similarly, this guy is telling Papaji is telling Ramana Maharshi, I'm dancing with the truth. I am dancing with the ultimate right now. With the ultimate being that is beyond like everything in reality, right? But Papaji says, I'm dancing with God. And Ramana Maharshi says to him something that just like in some sense as if Thor slamming his hammer to get the attention of the crowd. It's as if Ramana Maharshi tells him, a God that comes and goes is not the real God. And when you as a being, whoever you are listening to me, realize that this attention, we are an awareness to change. And if this unknown awareness to change, through intent, attention, and effort engages in the change, you become defined by the change, right? But from the beginning, in a sort of strange way, the unknown watcher cannot go anywhere. It's as if like at the background of consciousness, there's just presence of being. There's like an energetically intelligent presence of being. But in the foreground, it's completely like civilizations rising and falling in the world. If the mind is a portal, perhaps the soul can spin the portal of the mind, can learn, just like that kid, let's say example of the kid going into a forest and with a sword, practicing like hitting on it, like, you know, practicing hitting trees, you know, practicing swordsmanship. Similarly, it's as if modern human beings in 2022 begin practicing, you know, I would say advanced humanism. It's like we have swordsmanship, we have advanced civilizationship. The advanced civilization is the greatest idea in the outer realms. It is like, who was it, Aristotle? He's like just beginning something is like 50% of achieving the destiny of that thing you're trying to do. You know? You know, the species pretty much has wondered about what's in front of its eyes. You know, then it's like, okay, what's behind my eyes? Then it realizes it has free will, and free will is like how, you know, how they say the eyes are a window of the soul. Hilariously, the soul is staring out of the eyes like a window, you know. You know, it's like from the inside the soul is behind the window, and from the outside it's like other souls. Let me tell you what the ultimate destiny of an advanced civilizations advancing until infinitely would be. The idea is that a civilization managed to successfully, endlessly increase its speed in advancing. That means that everything in the civilization was so efficiently at the fastest speed advancing. And it's as if a developing advanced civilization accelerating closer and closer to the speed of light until it becomes invisible, until it is faster than light's, you know, storytelling reaction in the brain of an organism. What's remarkable is that the mysteries of our world are standing right in front of us. That is when the might of the inner explorer arises. You know, it's like after you attain truth, you're no longer interested in truth, because it's as if you're being it. There's nothing to attain. Now, what would a post-truth mind be? A post-truth mind would be from an individual efficiency, in some sense perceiving a collective efficiency. Pretty much, it's a way of saying people are getting out of their individual hells into individual heavens, but when they get into their individual heavens, they realize that they're being in a collective hell. And when, in some sense, the ultimate destination is how we go from the collective hell to the collective heaven. The collective heaven in the outer realms is the idea of the advanced civilization. In the inner realms, it is the idea of the most advanced state of being as a mind first, before a body. That means in front of our eyes, bodies are more important than minds, right? That means human beings are more important than, you know, the ruthlessness of ideology. Behind our eyes, the mind, which is the true mysterious viewer from within, it's like that which is looking out through your eyes, which it's like you can't give it a name because it's not something to name. It's just It's like what life is an awareness to being alive, and what an awareness of being alive leads to is the interaction of information, right? It's as if 4.5 billion years just to be able to be in a moment and take it all in and realize that it's like so many dimensions, like pillars are holding greater dimensions. That means if we think about this whole time on the planet, there has been an inner realms imagined to the planet, which is another way of saying how has the mind of the species been marching in towards the unknown future, and how has the body of the species been moving. And the most intelligent approach is not an approach that is choosing sides, is an approach so advanced that is saying all dimensions will be acknowledged for. That means an advanced civilization begins with the premise that the most advanced, with the premise that human beings deserve to be the most advanced beings. Why? Because it's like we get the great performance. It's like we're on stage now as a species, right? That means it's like, imagine seeing the performance of 8 billion master musicians, each have a unique instrument based on their DNA. And in some sense, the songs of the advanced civilization begin. How, in some sense, believe it or not, it's like how like 8 billion creatures suddenly realized the freedom of the mystery of the source that is moving their attention. And it's as if you instantly wake up beyond language, and you just realize how simply truth is being. And once you see that simplicity to how truth is being, the complex becomes the free will. It's as if like in the greatest being in a complex universe is a simple one, and the greatest being in a simple universe is a complex one. You know, right now we're still going through a phase of humanity where we're like, you give a voice to the whole species. And unfortunately, it's strange. Like in the outer realms, there should be a global urgency, but not a global urgency inspired out of fear. A global urgency inspired out of love, I would say. It's as if what would the greatest humanity look like? We're living at a time of the legend of the greatest humanity. This myth that in the future the most advanced display of human intelligence will occur in a synchronized way. And so the choice is yours. You know, a person can define themselves based on the known variables in front of their eyes or unknown variables behind their eyes. But ultimately, it's like 8 billion creatures walking towards the end of their time and the end of the time of the species, or in some sense, you know, the end of the meaning of time. That means an immortal being would be like, I hate watches, you know. An immortal being would probably hate watches. Honestly, I feel everybody alive now, we're like on the shoulder of a sleeping giant. And only through the decency of realizing the value of every human being, as Sri Ramana would say, it's like the abiding by your true nature. It's as if the most advanced being would look at any simulation of reality and in some sense would not have any emotion about it. Can have any emotion but does not have any emotion. There's a difference between those who have just emotions. It's as if, what it is, if the human being was considered as an instrument, when a person's vision of the world changes, when their perspective on the world changes and they become emotional, that's like the instrument being played in a way that has never been played before. Every human being is functioning under value system creation, right? Every human being looks at the world, they conclude it in a sort of, it's as if pretty much, what it is, it's like the world is like, a bag of, a big bag of rice, and in some sense, it's like every person is in some sense coming with their own sized bowl, right? And in some sense grabbing rice in that bowl and then leaving, right? It's as if we scoop sensory perception from the environment, and then we make a sort of analysis in consideration to our memories from the past, our previous information, the new information contrasts against the new previous information, and what ends up happening is that a new perspective aligns from information. Right, so it's as if like the human being has to be playful to realize we can never figure it out, but at the same time, serious enough to be like, what if we could though, and to see what that path would be. Honestly, the sentence, there's this story that there was this philosophy teacher, and this philosophy teacher who was like, let's say, a great philosophy teacher, all the students are waiting to see what he would say in his next lecture. And imagine like there was no curriculum, so everything would be a surprise. But imagine this philosophy teacher, in this story, just goes on the board, right? Walks to the chalkboard and writes the question WHY question. Or actually, let me tell the story differently. There's this philosophy teacher, the students of this philosophy teacher have to complete a final exam. In the final exam, there's, let's say, a bonus question, and the bonus question was a philosophy question, was just the question WHY question mark. So just why question mark. And all the students, after completing the exam, all the students quickly completed the exam and went to the bonus question, right? And for the bonus question, somebody said, why? Because God exists, the cosmological argument, and somebody was like, because of evolution, the biological perspective, it's as if we have no choice other than to be what evolution has sculpted us in. So many different answers, and imagine at some point the classroom meets the teacher and says, okay, who got the right answer to the bonus question? And the teacher says, the most quietest kid in the classroom got the right answer. And the answer to the question, the quietest kid in the classroom stands up, and the answer to the question was, why not question mark? These words, why not question mark, this phrase, has an ability to counter any ideological system. That means it's a sort of a possibility algorithm to implement upon moments where reality seems impossible. It's as if they tell the person, as if you know what it is, it's an approach of having the honor to not define oneself in a changing world. They tell the person, it's like, why did you do this? The person's, could say, why not? A philosophically equivalent, strike back. You see, it can always be countered. That's the nature of dualism. That means in a dualistic reality where, again, the dolphins jumping in and out of water, good, evil, light, darkness, all that, right? It's as if nobody's right and wrong. You know why? Because the moment one side of the coin thinks it's right, the other side of the coin's like, what about us? And when that side of the coin thinks it's right, the other side of the coin is like, what about us? Right? So it becomes something that it's like we realize the interdimensional nature of duality, right? That's the nature of minds. Our minds are a sort of system that is comparing either the future to the past, or like, the visible to the invisible. It's just a comparing. It's like literally, it's like people say, don't judge me, but that's all the brain is doing. The brain is a judgment engine. It can be, at least. And what I mean by that is that the value system is generating from itself. And itself is its reaction, or its unconscious reaction or conscious response to all the information that is consistent of the individual, all the content of the mind. It's like realizing in every moment where the person has thought they were weak, it would have taken the same amount of, like, let's say, neural energy, right, to think that they were strong. Literally, it's a point of view, like in the future, let's say, like these glowing aliens come down and they tell us the truth about the whole cosmos, and imagine the human species is like, well, that's your opinion. The aliens would be like, what's up with this species, I think, honestly, the human species is actually, if there were gods or there were like greater eyes of, let's say, extraterrestrial and light civilizations watching, or bodhisattvas watching, right? It would be as if they're all like giggling, right? It's as if like we're living at a time where the gods are laughing, as if like, you guys have all this stuff but you can't figure it out. You have a civilization that in some sense has access even to a sort of cyber reality, and you guys still can't figure it out. Like, I'm telling you, the whole cosmos is waiting to see if the human species realize it's also being. It's as if, as much as, these talks are sure some guy on his balcony, recording a podcast, but on another level, guys, this is what I tell myself to keep myself motivated. It's being the universe. This is why a person can't judge anyone and can't even judge themselves too seriously. It's as if before the ego could be cruel, it was as if kindness had dismantled it, the possibility of a more efficient way. It's like there's a reason Isaac Asimov says violence is the last refuge of the incompetent, because if we had the ability, to solve the problem in a non-violent way, why are we being violent? That means it's as if for billions, for a really long time, okay, we have lived as animals in nature, as pretty much how the Rebel Gita would say, the bewildered beast. Right? We've like, the brain has an incredible ability to become a bewildered beast, and sure, religious people may say evil, but I would say the most secular, proper secular way to approach evil is that it's like acting like a beast. Right? And when I say beast, I'm not saying like I give it pop culture reference, like it's irrelevant. I'm talking about it on a conceptual, philosophical level, right? That it's as if, okay, what has happened, right? It's like, did this creature develop language, communication, in memory and imagination, so that it could just punch it, like be violent physically in the outer realms? Like, violence in the outer realms is more and more not making sense at all. right? It's as if like world leaders want to go to war, go play a video game with the exact simulations of your militaries and see who wins. Do you know what I'm saying? That like violence has to slowly be pushed out from the outer realms, and that's the first step where we create a calm, gentle, and observant. Do you know, like in like as if like imagine the global society had the attention span that was eagle-like, right? I honestly think birds, they are one of the most interstellar symbols, even though we've made like a white dove the symbol for peace. But I think it's the white dove being the symbol for peace. Its true meaning is that it's like when we build sky cities, there will be no longer an absence or a lack of resources. You know, guys, for I think in the coming years, if my attention is authorized to continue, I am making this very uncommon decision of attempting to see at like implementing a strategy towards an advanced civilization. And if anybody doesn't have a similar view as this, I would say the membership is not for you. You know, it's like the future, you know, is waiting. The future is waiting for us to care for it. You know, that's 2022, guys. You know, our potential is like possible. It's like, you know, an inventor saw something, visualized something, and then invented it in the outer realms, created it. Now imagine, instead of visualizing an invention behind your eyes and building it in the outer realms, the person visualized in some sense their self and how that self would behave, and then the body followed. Do you know? There's an awareness that receives information in the inner realms, and then the body has the certainty to instantly move. It's like the body doesn't ask questions when like the person wants to go, you know, go drink water. It's like it happens instantaneously. Like the person doesn't think about anything that is second nature. There's an accepted level of skill with that it's as if like, I think for example, people who their work, they have to drive a lot. Right, it's after like years of driving, the person's like, this is same as walking. Like it's that. Do you know what I'm saying? You know, I honestly feel in, let's say, the YouTube cyberspace ecosystem, if human beings just, if YouTube was like, hey, human beings, those who are honest, let's say, get perks or something, right? And so we had honest human expressionism, right? Because in some sense, the artificial is like a simulation, and simulations are never fulfilling. Fear not the wonder of a world in which the way you walk in it is once. That is, I think, the purest expression of art. I think this is true art, when every moment stands in the presence of the cosmos and all that is, and acknowledges itself and the world. Because what is truly within us is how the whole world is keeping us. How all the forces of all dimensions are preserving the position of the human entity. It's as if like we don't believe, we say we can't see aliens, but the circumstances to how a creature exists on a planet, that is like the most alien combination of events, you know. It's kind of strange. It's as if like from one dimension we are this planet, from another dimension we never were from it. A free mind means the inner realms and the outer realms have in some sense accepted the same source. And the ultimate source of it is that you start being simple and then you notice complexity. If you're bored of complexity, you know, you suddenly you shift to simplicity. You know, and any state of mind could in some sense be piloted with this approach and technique. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and wonder about what kind of portal your mind is and what can in some sense enter from your vision into the vision of humanity. Because the greatness of humanity is not we all artificially act like we're doing the right thing, but in some sense actually every universe having an authorization for sharing its efficiency. It's pretty much a way of saying, I want a species to feel free and then share its greatest ideas, and then with that momentum we begin in some sense resetting the cultural structure, not resetting it in a way where we're getting rid of civilization 1.0, but it's as if in some sense civilization 1.0 either becomes a museum, or in some sense it evolves, or in some sense civilization 2.0 happens somewhere outside of civilization 1.0, and eventually the you can say the circles of the civilizations meet, intersect. What I'm trying to say is that this whole time the potential of an advanced humanity could be activated. That means as if from now on, whoever you are, wonder about how your most advanced version of all the dimensions you can fathom can be instantaneously and it's like effortlessly and instantaneously. Those who find an instantaneous freedom realize the true nature of this world we're in. Honor the eyes, your own eyes. Honor the eyes of your species, and honor the eyes in which the world is in. An advanced humanity awaits. An advanced civilization is the future's birthright. Much blessings and namaste.